What's up, Wellbeing Nation? We're back with another episode with Shohreh Davoodi in the house of Glitter and Grit Fitness. I'm so glad to have her here. How do we meet?
I think we met because my gym was closing down and I was looking for a new gym to train out of, and your gym's right in my neighborhood, which is super convenient. And I just reached out to you and was like, hey, are you guys looking for trainers? And you weren't, but you were so nice. And you were like, but let's meet up anyways. And that's how we met.
That's right. I was thinking about it. I was like, before we do the podcast, I'm trying to remember how we met. That's right. You sent me an email. It was like a really long and like well thought out email. It's like very specific. And I was like, don't do that. But I'm down to network. You know, what's up? And then I think, you came down. We talked. I took you through an assessment. Mm-hmm. That's right. And then from there, we just kind of like started hanging out. I came to Open Gym. Yeah. And then you started your own business. You started your own business online. Tell the people about what that's about. When did you start it? What do you stand for? What do you not stand for?
That's a lot of questions. Okay.
Yeah. Get it.
So let's see. So I used to be an attorney, and I officially left my job last January. So I completely left it. I had been putting the pieces in place for about, maybe 6-8 months before that to leave the job. But it was January. I was like, all right, clean break. We're leaving. Not going to be an attorney anymore. And so I spent the first couple of months trying to figure out, what am I going to do? What kind of business do I want to run? I knew it was going to be fitness business related, but I wasn't sure quite what it was going to look like. So probably March, April, right around when I met you, is when Glitter and Grit Fitness was officially born. And I would say that my approach is a little bit different than the average personal trainer for women, because I actually take a very body positive approach to fitness. So what that means is that I don't assume that all my clients have the same goal of weight loss, and I don't necessarily push my clients toward weight loss unless that's what they want. So I'm actually a huge proponent of being healthy at any size and finding ways to move and enjoy movement at any size. And I think one of the biggest issues I've seen in the fitness business, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, is kind of these assumptions about what women want that maybe they don't necessarily want, and also assuming things about people based on what they look like. So if we see someone who is larger in size, we assume A, they want to lose weight, and B, that they're not healthy. That they're not active, and that's just not always the case. Some people's weight settles in different places, and for them to lose weight and be kind of typical American beauty standard thin, they would actually have to push themselves to an unhealthy place to get there, which we don't want. So I coach only women. And I do exercise, I do nutrition coaching, and then I also work on the mindset piece, which is also a little bit different. So all of my clients do mindset assignments, and we kind of help their body image and confidence so that what we're doing in the gym can carry over to the rest of their lives.
Okay. I like that refreshing perspective of like body positive, and I think you also see some interesting stuff, like almost like a rebuttal from a lot of like hard-nosed people out there. Mm-hmm. They read the word body positive, like, oh, that's a bunch of BS. And I'll say, oh, that's like, it's just another word for you're too lazy. And I think that's what often ends up causing more and more of a rift between like people wanting to even sign up with a coach. It's like, well, are there going to be this hard-nosed person that's not going to accept me for where I am? And I think that's a problem too, because I think people always are thinking they're not where they're supposed to be. And where they are now is not enough. Mm-hmm. And since they're not enough, like, why should they start in the first place? So how do you even, I don't know if you can say even combat these people, but how do you even like talk through those issues with people?
Yeah, so this is actually a common problem, and I see this a lot with fitness professionals who they're like, okay, well, the body positive movement is great and all, but it sounds like it's just an excuse for people to like be fat and lazy and eat whatever they want. And I think that it's important to note that loving your body is not mutually exclusive with wanting to make changes to your body. So when we are talking about being body positive, we are talking about how a woman should be able to, and men, but I exclusively work with women, women should be able to love themselves no matter what size they are, no matter what they look like, no matter if they are able-bodied or disabled. So it's this idea that no matter where you are at this space and time, that you can still love yourself and that you are still allowed to be respected as a human being, and you're allowed to feel joy and move and enjoy your life. So instead of saying, oh, well, when I lose 50 pounds or I lose 100 pounds, then I'm allowed to get respect from humanity. And then people are allowed to appreciate my beauty. And that's just not true. So you can be body positive where you are and still want to make changes or have goals for yourself. So you can say, I love myself, or I'm trying to get to a point where I love myself right now. But at the same time, I know that I'd feel better if I moved more. I know that I'd feel better if I ate better. And so you can also work on those things too. So that's why all these pieces are important together.
Okay. So it's like, from a place of love itself, then you're doing more loving things for yourself, rather than like from a place of disgust. I'm doing this out of disgust for myself. And so the other question I have, or after that, is like, when someone comes to you, like when a woman comes up to you and says, hey, I want to start coaching, like what are like their common fears, like of even starting with you, and like how do you even tackle that in the first place?
Let's see. Okay, common fears. So I tend to work with a lot of women who are very busy. So one of their biggest fears is that they're going to be letting me down, like they're not going to meet my expectations, which is a really common fear. And I kind of try and talk to them about the fact that there's this coaching relationship, but they're going to be having to do the work on their end. I think that's really important. Sometimes people come to a coach and they assume like you're going to do the work for me, which is impossible. If I work out with you 3 times a week, that's great, and you're going to have to push yourself in those workouts, but then that's 3% of your entire week. And so whatever else happens outside of that, if we're not in communication and the client isn't trying to do other things, then there's not going to have any work towards their goal, I think. So that's kind of one of the biggest concerns is, just what do we do about the situation? Let's see, some other common concerns that I get is, I think women in general just have anxiety about hiring coaches because a lot of them have had bad experiences with coaches in the past. I have had women come to me and say, I've had, and it's not always male coaches, but, maybe they've had a male coach in the past who they said, oh, well, I had this guy and he would like grab my fat and he would, tell me, oh, we got to get rid of that tire and stuff like that. And would speak to them in this really gross, inappropriate way that made them uncomfortable. And so I think they're fearful of hiring someone else because, they don't, personal training is expensive and, they don't want to feel like they're wasting money or they're being mistreated. And so kind of helping them understand that I am not that person and, apologizing on behalf of like people in the industry who are giving us a bad name and doing stuff like that. I mean, it's really, some of the horror stories I've heard are not good.
I want to hear more horror stories. I'm curious. I'm curious to see, because I think if that's more talked about openly, I think there can be more discussion about it. Because I think sometimes people are not even aware of the fact that these things are going on. They just think, oh, this is what training is. Training means that you're not getting fat anymore, and that's the norm. But they don't understand the underlying emotional aspect of what that does, or how to treat a human being like a human being. Yeah. Period. And
I have another good one for you too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My other point I wanted to say, if we go into the next story, is that I think I almost think, I don't know what you think about this. I want to hear your viewpoint. I almost think that coaches that do that will grab people like that or do whatever, maybe they're projecting their own insecurity on them. Maybe they're I used to be like that, or I saw that in someone else, or my mom or my sister, and I was disgusted by it, and then they're taking it out on this person. And it gives them a sense of release or outlet. I don't know what you think about that.
I think that's definitely possible. I think to some extent trainers for a long time, I think the only kind of trainer that was acceptable was like the boot camp trainer.
Oh, yeah.
So, just like, and some people still train this way. It's not my training style, but, know, just like screaming at the client, like making them sweat. And like that was supposed to be inspiring. And so I think that some people got it in their heads that like, okay, the way to inspire a client is to be mean to the client.
Yeah.
Like if I make this client cry, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I've succeeded in life.
And like people make jokes towards me about that. They're like, oh, I bet you're such a drill sergeant in your sessions, stuff like that. And I'm like, that's literally not anywhere close to the way that I train, and I don't think it would be effective. But I've also heard stories from other trainers where like clients have come to them and told them, I need you to be harsher on me, I need you to yell at me. So some people want that. And like, if you want that, I'm going to send you to someone else. Because that's not, that's not my style. And I found that in order to be successful in this business, you do need to be true to who you are personally. So I don't think that's maybe the right way to go about it unless your client has specifically asked for that kind of thing, or unless you've made your brand based on that, so people are coming to you for that. That being said, I don't think it's ever appropriate to grab a client or make comments about them. I actually have made it a habit in my own practice with clients to not talk about the way clients look in like a general manner, which is a little bit different for personal trainers. But in general in life, women are so much judged on the way that they look, right? We're constantly expected to look a certain way, and we've kind of gotten these associations in society where like losing weight is good. So when people lose weight, we compliment them and we make a big deal out of it, as if they're better because they lost weight. And then when people gain weight, we just ignore it. We don't say anything. And we just, as a culture, we collectively kind of look down. And so that's really pushing this idea that, okay, well, thin is what we want. Thin is the only good thing to be. And then so when those people, who've lost weight, inevitably a lot of them gain some of that weight back, and then they feel crappy. They notice that all the good compliments have gone away, and then they feel shitty. And so I try to just stay away from that entirely, and I compliment my clients more on what they can do, so where they've improved. So, if their deadlift has gotten really strong, and maybe before they couldn't even do a hip hinge when they met me, I always want to emphasize that and compliment them on those things instead of going straight to, you've lost 10 pounds, congratulations, that's awesome. Instead I can say, oh, you look really happy. It seems like you're feeling much more healthy and more energetic, and kind of focus on those things, because I know so much in the world they're getting about their looks. And so in my coaching, I want to take a step away from that so they can have like a little reprieve from that.
Yeah. That's how I like to look at coaching too. And I think it's kind of like this weird thing too, where in marketing, like in fitness marketing itself, it's like, in some ways, some people that are trying to propagate or perpetuate this idea that it's important that you look at what you can do and what you have been able to do, or what you couldn't do before. It's like sometimes I even see them market it like the old like Matrix style, which is like, oh, weight loss, but then they flip it on them. Like, well, this is the truth. Like, you've been living in the Matrix kind of thing for a while. And like, people think that, weight loss is the answer, but the truth is, it's how you feel. So I think that's like an interesting dynamic, like that almost that even the people that would probably resonate better with the idea that what they couldn't do, like what they could do now is much better than what they could do before, that maybe sometimes that marketing still pulls them in a way. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's because of like old conditioning, or that like that's what society has told them to believe?
So it's interesting that you say this, because I have some friends who work with business coaches, which is pretty common in any industry. And I've had friends who their style of coaching is similar to mine, but their business coaches have said the way you get people in is to use the language that they know and look for. Yeah. And so you should, in your advertising and marketing, talk about weight loss, and for women, zapping cellulite and those kind of stupid things that drive me insane, as a way to get women in the door. And then once they're in the door, you can kind of work on other goals and give them your knowledge. I mean, and that's kind of like, that is like the thing with business coaching right now. I read that all over the internet, and it sucks because it doesn't sit well with me. For sure. I feel uncomfortable marketing in that way. And, business experts are like, oh, well, then you're just like leaving business at the door if you're not willing to market in that way. So it's this really hard situation of like, okay, well, I'm supposed to do this to get clients in the door, but it doesn't feel true to me and it doesn't feel true to my coaching. Like, do I stick with what's authentic or do I take this expert advice?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with it too. I have a business coach right now, and it's like, it's kind of similar. They're like these key words that pull. He talks about it as like, it's going to sound fucking awful, but he talks about like pain points, right?
Yes.
What are the pain points in the industry? Weight loss, fat loss. For guys, muscle mass. Then there's like, I want a nice booty, I want a nice whatever, right? Those are the pain points. Or now, what I think is nice is people are starting to have like actual physical pain as a pain point. Or it could be that I have no energy, or I have no sex drive, I'm just tired all the time, whatever it may be. Now it's changing a little bit. That's nice. But it still seems like the most strongest words are going to be like weight loss and cellulite. But maybe, and I think that's what's difficult for me too, because I feel so out of integrity, like even putting that marketing on a sales page or landing page. But somewhere in there, like even though you told me not to do it, I'm like, well, this is what it's going to really take. And because I can't like not put it in there. He's like, fine, put it in there. And I was like, I just can't. And then when they come, it's the sales process of that whole situation is weird because they come in like, oh, I just want to lose 50 pounds. And I'm like, well, let's talk about like, what's really going on like physiologically. And then that sales process becomes like this effort of kind of slowly like giving them a map. Like first month is like really kind of like showing you and going over like form and cues, making you feel like you can do this. You're confident enough to do the movements, and then really like kind of really take an honest look at what you're eating and how you're like living your lifestyle, like what's your relationship with food, and just being aware of what's going on. Not even touching or changing food, just becoming aware of it. And then from there, we can kind of start to make changes over time. That seems to be like the most scary freaking thing for people, men and women, but mostly I see it in women. And I guess my question to you is like, how the hell do you navigate that whole aspect of like, they're coming in thinking, I just want to like freaking go, what do you do?
Yeah. So obviously the most common thing that people come to me for is going to be weight loss. And this is why this is the marketing thing that people want to do. And again, remember that society tells women that they should always be on a diet and they should always fucking try to lose weight.
True.
So, even if that may not be the best thing for them, most people think that that's what they should be doing. The average woman is not happy with where she is, regardless of size, because I have clients who are all different sizes. And most of them still want to lose weight. I have a few who don't, who came to me and said they wanted to gain muscle, which is awesome. I love those clients. It makes me so happy. I do like a little dance. But most clients come to me and they say, I want to lose weight. I don't want to get bulky. Like those are the first two things out of their mouth, which is, we can talk about the bulky thing in a little bit because that's a whole other thing.
For sure.
But, I think first thing I do with those clients is kind of tempering expectations because sometimes they do come in with a number. And they're like, I want to lose this many pounds or whatever. And so I have to explain to them, what scale weight is and kind of the relationship between fat mass and lean mass and how, if they're working with me and doing strength training, they're going to be putting on some muscle. And so some women will end up at the exact same weight they're at now, but their body composition has changed dramatically. And so they'll look like they've lost a lot of weight and they will look, more, I'm going to put this in quotes, toned because women love this phrase. But their weight may stay the same. And so, and I actually just recently wrote an entire blog post about why not to get too obsessed with what you see on the scale. And I also do a lot of different progress tracking techniques with my clients because I don't want them to get so hung up on the scale. Not because the scale is bad, but what the scale can tell you is very limited. So, we track energy levels and we look at nutrition skills and see how they're doing with different nutrition skills. I have my clients take pictures because I feel like when they can't see something because they see themselves every day in the mirror, when they see the pictures next to each other, that's really clear for them. Like there have been changes that have been made or there haven't. And why is that? And then we also do body circumference measurements most of the time for clients who are looking to lose weight.
Yeah.
So I try to have all these different ways of tracking and talking about progress with them so that they stop seeing progress as only the scale moving is progress. But it's really, really hard to get it out of people's heads that, you know, this matters less to me, and so it should matter less to them. Because I'll have clients who, like, everything's going well. They're getting way stronger in the gym, like they're feeling good. They're, you know, a lot of my clients use exercise to help them with anxiety or other issues, and they're feeling good. And they'll still say, you know, I just really wish the scale would move. It's not moving. And that it's hard for me as a coach because I'm like, well, I can change your training and what we're doing so that you lose more weight. That's maybe would not be my first plan. But at the same time, like, I have to respect what the client wants as well. And so it's kind of this line between getting also behind why. Why is it important that the scale move to you? Why is the number important to you? Because there's different reasons for different people. So if you can kind of pick at that a little bit, you may find that that's really not the most important thing to them. But yeah, there's only so much you can do because, again, I do respect what my clients' goals are. And so at the end of the day, if they're like, I really, really want to see this scale move and that's a feasible thing for us to work on, then I will adjust to work on that goal if we need to.
Fair. I mean, I guess what you said there really resonated with me when you said like the reason behind the weight loss. Like, why are they so fixated on, like, I want to lose weight? And, like, really getting to the bottom of that. Like, what are they looking to feel? And I had someone say, like, oh man, when I was like 118 pounds and I was 18 years old, I felt my best. I'm like, how old are you now? I'm 35. I'm like, dude, that's like
there's a reason for that.
Yeah. And so it's this interesting, like, you know, just weird thing going on where they look back in time and they're like, have this viewpoint of, oh, when I was 18, I felt like this vigor and I felt attractive, blah, 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 blah. And now that I'm 35, everything's gone to shitter. So it's kind of like, for lack of a better word. And I think it's interesting. This person that I was talking to, I'm not going to name any names, but the person I was talking to, 118 was the number. And I was like, well, what did you feel at 118? It's like, oh, I felt like I could just fit into clothes better. I felt like I just, you know, I could see my stomach really flat, and I had lines on my tricep, and I had lines on my back, and that's like, okay, to me, I'm thinking, okay, this is muscularity, there's tone, you know, whatever, and then there's this feeling of I fit better in my clothes, I feel sexier in my clothes, whatever it is, I just feel more confident. Cool. Awesome. So then I have to ask them, it's like, is this what you're really, like, looking for? But I won't say it that way.
Right.
Like, so you're saying that, you know, when you fit better in clothes, you feel what? Oh, I just feel good. Okay, so you want to feel good in your clothes. Am I correct? Yes. So it's like, Is that something you would go through too?
Yes, absolutely. And that conversation you just described, I feel like I've had 100 times.
Yeah.
It's a client who comes in, it's either with a picture or a number, and they say, I used to be this weight.
Get me here.
I want to get me back to here. And exactly, they're not thinking about what were their circumstances.
Yeah.
Like 18 versus 35, kind of an important difference, age difference there, because we all age. Or, you know, I have one client who was, you know, now she's like an extremely busy attorney kind of a thing. And her life was totally different at the point in time when she was the weight that she really wanted to be. And you also, the other thing that happens is clients will come in and they'll say, well, I was doing this when I was at my lowest weight.
Yeah.
And so they're like, let's do that thing again. So maybe it was like a really low carb diet or something like that. So they're like, that's what I want to do. I'm like, all right, well, let's sort through this here. Because that may not be the best thing for them to be doing. And for me personally, in my coaching, I try to get my clients away from restrictive dieting because so many of my clients have just, you know, they're used to this like 1,200 calories number and they're like either way under eating or they're hopping on whatever diet bandwagon is out at the moment, whether it's paleo or keto or whatever. And with my clients, I'm very diet agnostic. I personally am vegan, but I don't push that on any of my clients. I help them find, you know, a sustainable way of eating for them. But yeah, so many of them are like, well, I was skinny when I did this thing. And so like, let's try that and let's try to get back to there. And they assume that's the only thing that's going to work for them. And they can be very, very hard-headed about it where, I can be talking all the reason, and all the reason does not matter because their emotional self is like, no, I'm attached to this thing. Yeah.
So actually, like, when you said the whole 18 and 35, like they were in different places of life, like what is it about being 18 and 35 that makes it different?
Oh, well, there's a lot of things.
Yeah, I want to hear your perspective.
There's so many different things.
For sure.
I mean, I think in general, like, obviously our lives are just different at 18. This is, pretty much the end of puberty for women. Men are kind of, I guess, still a little bit in the middle of it because they reach kind of that end of puberty a little bit later. So hormones are totally different at that point in time in our lives. Most of us are much more active when we're younger. We're in school and everything like that, but we're changing around between periods in school. We're going around to get to lunch. Our metabolisms tend to be much faster at a younger age. Not for everybody, but a lot of people's metabolisms are faster. So at 18, things are a little bit different. And honestly, the world is weighing on you a little bit less when you're 18. You're either at home in high school or maybe you're just starting college and your parents are still kind of a big part of your life. Chances are you're not taking care of anybody else, so you probably don't have kids. You may not even have a pet at this point in time. You don't have a spouse, most likely. All those things add time. I feel like most of us have much more of an abundance of time at 18 than we do at 35 when we are now working jobs. Some people are working multiple jobs. Chances are we're taking care of other people besides ourselves. And honestly, I'm trying to think between, 18 and 35, like, also the world in general has just changed, I feel like, with technology and everything else. Like, people are doing things so differently when it comes to food and exercise, and expectations for work, I feel like, are increasing every year with, like, we want you in the office more, we want you working more hours. So people are putting in more time for less gain, I think, as time goes on. So yeah, I mean, it's so many changes, and all of those things are stressors on the body that just add up over time. And the vast majority of people do gain a little bit of weight every year. And then they come in and they're like, I want to lose this in 6 months. I'm like, well, how long did it take you to gain it?
Yeah.
And so you can't sustainably lose something in 6 months that you spent the last 15 years gaining, which a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to get your opinion about, because people will say that to me as well. They're just like, well, not only will they say, okay, this is my goal, I want to lose this much weight, blah, 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 but then they'll also say to me, like, oh, my friend Sally or my friend whatever did X, Y, and Z, and she got this awesome result, and blah, 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 and that's what I want to do. And then it's just, it can be frustrating sometimes, but I know that they're teaching points, or this is points where you educate. But then why do you think, even though you tell them and you educate them, you're the professional, you're saying these things, like you have this, you've cultivated your own sense of professionalism around this topic, and yet they're still coming back with, well, I haven't lost any weight, and blah, blah, blah. Like, why do they do that?
So I think some of it's learned, for sure. It's really hard to break through kind of these societal expectations of people. And I think for women especially, this is true because, again, our whole lives we're told that, the most important thing about us is the way that we look, and it's our weight.
That's true.
And that's really tough as a woman to have been told your entire life that your self-worth should stem from the way that you look. And that is why mindset is so important for me to work on with my clients, because I have clients who think that when they get down to a certain weight or a certain level of leanness that they will be happy. So they're hinging their happiness on being able to get to a certain amount of weight. And the problem with that is even when they get to that weight, guess what? They are not happy. Because the thing about, aesthetic goals is that you will always find a new one. So I know women who are at 12% body fat because they're a bikini competitor and they can pick over their bodies more than someone at, 25% body fat. Like, They can always be leaner. This can be tighter. And part of that is they're in competition with other women, literally, over their aesthetics.
Yeah.
But there's always more goals to be had with your body. You know, your abs can always pop a little more. Your booty can always be a little bit bigger. So you never reach this perfection that you think you're going to magically reach. And so if you decide that you're going to hinge your happiness on getting to looking a certain way, you will never be happy. And so it's so important to talk with women about this and set the proper expectations at the beginning of that. The reason we have other goals and why we also look at performance goals and these other things is because I need you to find happiness in yourself outside of the way you look, because if you don't do that, you're just not going to be happy. Because the other thing is we all age, right? We're just talking about the 18 to 35. So let's say that you can get down to this magical level of leanness, and let's say you're happy with that and you look great. Well, you're not going to be able to maintain that for the rest of your life. You're not going to be the 80-year-old woman who looks like this. So if you've said, this is the only way I can be happy, well, your body's going to change. And then what are you going to do? You're going to go back to being depressed, or you're going to do something really, really restrictive to try and hold on to that way that you look. And then you're going to be in a really bad place. And that's how we have women who have orthorexia, and we have women who have eating disorders and all these other things, because they're really holding on to the importance of this visual piece. And it's tough. Like I said, I only work with women, and it's tough to only work with women, because it's kind of, in some ways, it's a whole different ball game from probably the typical things that you see with men. And I honestly don't know what the most common issues with men are, because my hands are full with these common issues with women.
That brings me to my next point. Like, what is your mindset coaching? Like, what do you do there? Like, that sounds very interesting to me.
So most of my mindset coaching is around journaling. Okay. It sometimes can be kind of like more thought experimenty or visualization, but most of it is the client kind of working with a topic or an idea and writing things down. So these span all kinds of different topics depending on what we're working on at the moment. But for example, I kind of help my clients bring their viewpoint away from what their body looks like and more towards what their body can do. So we kind of focus on this gratitude piece of being grateful for what our bodies give us instead of caring as much about what they look. So for example, one assignment that is usually kind of a first assignment that I'll give to clients is I'll ask them to make a list of 5 to 10 things that their body can do that they really, really appreciate their bodies can do for them. And it can be as simple as like breathing. I am grateful that my body breathes so that I'm alive, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it can be, I am grateful that my body allows me to play with my dog, or other things like that. So that's kind of a common assignment that I'll give. And it just gives people a different framework for looking at themselves. Because again, women are constantly told to care about how we look. And so I'm always trying to reframe that about like, let's look at our body in other ways. Like, how can we be grateful for our bodies? What does our body help us do? If there's parts of your body that you don't like, let's look at what that's useful for. So if you're like, oh, well, I really hate the cellulite in my butt, you can be like, but also I'm grateful that my butt is nice and cushiony, and so it makes sitting comfortable. Like things like that, which may sound silly, but you know, women aren't used to thinking of their body in that way. You know, we're used to picking parts of us that we hate and like really focusing on them. And so it's just taking the focus away from that a little bit and focusing on other things that are important. And with the mindset, I do other things too. Like we kind of, one of the things I do, I call it my social media sweep, which is where we talk a little bit about kind of the negative effects that social media can have. And yes, as I'm sure you know, and I give some assignments based on that. So example, if you're someone who follows like a bunch of the Fitspo Instagram and stuff like that, I have clients really assess if that's helping them in any way. Like, is it actually inspiring you to work out, or is it making you feel shitty? And then if it's making you feel shitty, we do like an unfollowing, where I'm like, go unfollow the accounts that are making you feel like crap and get out of there. And then we'll also talk about how important it is for clients to see different types of bodies, because again, we have this sort of American ideal of like the thin, willowy, blonde woman, or now sometimes it's actually like the thin, toned blonde woman is the thing right now. And so I remind them that, you know, the more we're exposed to different body types, the more those become normal and beautiful in our minds. And so in my Instagram, for instance, I have gone out of my way to make sure that I have all different kinds of people. So able-bodied and disabled people. I have people who are African-American and people who are gay and all these different things. And they all have amazing accounts and I love following them, but it really just broadens my horizons and it makes sure that I am seeing different people, different shapes and sizes. I follow a lot of the body positive accounts. And so these are, women ranging from all different body shapes and weights. And that's helpful to see because, again, in our society, we are really taught to look at a fat body and be disgusted by it. That's just a fact. Most people have been taught their whole lives that when you see someone who is large, to be grossed out or to feel bad for them or whatever. And I remember, I can't remember what book this is from, but I read a book once where someone said what they did to overcome this was that they literally looked up fat bodies on Google and they would just scroll through the pictures over and over until they were desensitized to them and they no longer looked at them and said that's gross, and instead they just could look at them and say that's just another body. And so I think with social media, a similar way you can do that is to make sure that you're following a wide variety of different people with different viewpoints and different bodies so that, again, you no longer see those things as strange or gross and you start to just see them as like, those are people just like me. So that's kind of some different mindset things that I work on.
Yeah. I really like that. I mean, that social media sweep, that's potent right there. That's like, because most people I even talk to, was like, oh man, I was looking at this like booty bun workout chick.
There's so much of that.
I'm like, what? And anyway, so they're looking at this person, and it's like, it just seems so unattainable, like you're saying. And I think that's what kicks them in the ass several times. It's like, oh, I can't do it. It's so much, so overwhelming. I was listening to a lady, her name's Mel Robbins, you've ever heard of her. But she has this whole thing called the 5-second rule. It's like her deal. But basically,
I've heard that.
And so she was talking about in one of her videos. It's like there's this kind of gap that we look at, like when we start trying to accomplish a goal, especially like losing weight, or I say quote unquote losing weight, or looking differently, or feeling differently. There seems to be like this gap that seems insurmountable. It's like I'm here. And I look at where I want to be according to what I think I'm supposed to look like, given like Instagram account 1, Snapchat account 2. And then I'm looking at that gap and thinking, there's no fucking way. So her whole thing is like, you create these if-then statements. Actually, I want to get your opinion on this. I'm not sure how I feel about it, so I want to see what you think. These if-then statements, right? So you first acknowledge where you are. Like you come from a loving place, you're compassionate with yourself, saying, "This is where I am, and it's okay." Like I've gotten this far in life. I should look at like if I was. She always has this exercise. Like if I was baby Sumer, looking at adult Sumer, like I would look back at baby me and be like, "Hey, you've come so far. Give him a hug. Like you're here." Compassion. Now I want to be other place in life. I want to be feeling this. I want to do this. I want to look like this. And then once you go there, you start looking at the habits that are surrounding your life right now that are keeping you the way you are. And then you create these if-then statements to almost like combat these old habits that are keeping you the way where you are. It's like, if I feel like reaching for a cookie, then I will reach out to a friend and tell them that I want to reach out for a cookie. And this trusted friend will treat me with empathy, compassion, and help me get through it. Rather than going on the autopilot loop of, if I want a cookie, I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm going to get that cookie. I'm going to love the cookie. And then she kind of goes to these if-thens. Now, I kind of like sent this to a client to just see what her thoughts were. I was curious, right? Yeah. She fired back and she was like, well, these if-then statements sound like torture. The cookie sounds like so much freaking fun.
Right.
What do you think about that stuff?
So that's really interesting. So on the one hand, it's great because it's a way for a client to disrupt a habit, right? And I don't know if you've ever read, God, do you know that book about habits that was like really popular?
Seven Highly Effective?
No, it's like The Science of Habits or something like that. I can't remember the name of the book, but it basically explains like how a habit is formed and how you can break a habit. And this guy's whole thing was that the science shows that you can't actually just get rid of a habit. You have to replace it with something else. So he explained, for instance, if you're a smoker, and usually it's something like the mouthfeel of like putting something in your mouth.
Oral fixation.
Like, yeah, oral fixation. And then, so he said you can't just like, I'm just going to stop smoking. Or very few people can just stop doing that. They need to replace it. So when they would normally reach for a cigarette, they, you know, take a piece of candy or a toothpick or the e-cigarette. So they have something else. And then eventually, after 21 days, because it's supposed to take 21 days to build a habit, they're able to replace it with that thing. And so they don't want the cigarette anymore. Now they want this other thing. So apparently our brains are wired to prefer other habits, you know, just to switch habits basically. And so the if then is interesting because you're forcing the person to create the new habit. So you're saying where normally you would do this thing, I'm making a commitment to myself that I'm going to try and replace it with this other thing. So from the science that I understand, that makes sense. But I can also see how that could be torture to a client, and also how a client would say, well, I'm just not going to fucking do that. Like, I don't want to. I'm not interested in it. So it's hard because I could see clients being very resistant to that. And again, I think it's this combination of like, okay, we have our logical self and we have our emotional self. And so logical you is like, okay, yeah, science, that sounds great. And emotional you is like, fuck no, I don't want to do that. So I don't really know how you get around it. I mean, maybe you try it with other clients and see if anybody else is receptive to it or if they like that. Because it could be a personality thing where some people are drawn to that idea and other people are like, nope, try again.
Yeah, I thought, and I think like the other thing this person was saying was like emotionally, and the way she says it's very interesting. She's like, emotionally, we'll never be ready. We'll never be ready to make a change, like quote unquote, never be ready. And our emotions will always direct us towards like something that's basically like she was saying that we're hedonistic beings in a way. We want to feel good. At the end of the day, we want to feel good. We want to feel happy. We want to feel like we're taken care of. And even Tony Robbins, if you know who he is, I'm sure you know who he is. He has this whole like there are 7 basic human needs. Like you want to feel certain, significant, contribution, all these different things. And if these needs aren't met, then you feel like you're unfulfilled. And so basically, what I'm seeing from all these thought leaders, the people that speak on these big stages, are saying kind of the same thing over and over. It's like emotionally, if you feel like these needs are not being met, then you start seeking them from wherever you can grab it from. So if it's transient, it's quick, it does the job like Coke. It's like, fuck yeah, I want to sniff that thing straight up.
Yes.
But if it's not transient and it's a long game, it's like the whole gap thing. I don't know if I'll ever get there. So it's like going from emotional state to changing habit. That's, I think, a very like difficult, like mucky, weird area for people. And like, I think there's so many ways to do it. You know, like I'm sure you have your method. I'm sure like there are things that work for me and my clients and things that haven't. And sometimes I wonder too. It's like I want to have all the empathy and compassion in the world for every single person. I don't want to ever give up on a client. That's like my thing, right? And like, when is it the line of they need to assume some responsibility? Like, when is that a line? Or is that even a line? Or is it more like, I have to go deeper?
So I did want to say that kind of with the habits piece and this gap feeling is that, again, sort of societal training is this, the quick fix is really in fitness and nutrition, and it has been forever. There's, $1 billion industry built around people's insecurities about their weight, saying, we can do it like this really fast. And this is why we have, the juice fast that's putting people in hospitals and
shake weight,
the most useless piece of exercise equipment ever that people buy. I have a good friend, her name's Rachel, and she's a trainer in New York City. And she was telling me about some of the stuff that her clients come to her and ask if they should buy, because she actually does in-home personal training.
Okay.
And so they usually buy a few pieces of equipment. Sure. And so they'll come to her all excited and they'll be like, should I buy this thing? And she's like, no, that is a waste of your time. But again, the way these things are being packaged, just like shiny and like they're it's so fast and it's going to help you lose weight really quickly. And so I think the problem is that, again, people's expectation is that they should be able to lose weight really quickly or reach their goals really quickly because, one, that speaks to that emotional side that wants to.
Yeah.
So they want to believe that it's possible.
Mm.
You have, shows like The Biggest Loser, where literally the goal is to have people lose weight as quickly as possible. And obviously they've followed up with those people, and the vast majority of them gain it all back, and their metabolisms are shot to hell because that's not a sustainable thing to do. And so we kind of live in a society where that's the thing. And so I think we have to remember that when we're coaching our clients, because most of them are coming into it thinking like this could still be possible, because all the marketing is coming at them of like, just take this pill or take this shake, and they've wasted hundreds, who knows, thousands of dollars on shit that didn't work for them.
For sure.
And so a lot of them come in defeated thinking nothing will ever work for me, or like, I'm not cut out for this. And then we have the social media piece we talk about where they're like, well, there's all these beautiful round asses and I'm never going to achieve this. And I'm like, social media is sneaky too, because they have all these algorithms. So like if you follow fitness accounts, all of a sudden like your whole feed is filled with this stuff. And so then you're like, everyone in the world has this tiny waist and a giant butt. And I'm like, no, this is like, beautiful. It's like there is, from the statistics I've seen, only 5% of women have what is considered the ideal female body type. 5%. That's incredibly low, but because of the imagery that's thrown at us, you would think that it's so common that like at least half of women look this way, and they do not. And so I kind of try and keep all those things in mind when I have clients coming in. But like you said, sometimes clients kind of reach this point where they're sort of giving up, and they're expecting you to either do the work for them or fix it for them, but they're not putting in the work on their end. And it's hard, I actually see, I'm in several Facebook groups for trainers, and there's all these very intense conversations about whether or not you should fire certain clients. And people have very strong opinions about it. Some people are like, oh, fuck that client. You should just fire them if a client does anything that you don't like. Just, you don't have time for that. And I'm like, well, like, it's a little bit different when it's your business versus like personal relationships. Like, people are always talking about toxic people and how they need to cut them out of their lives. And I'm like, that's, fine, do what you want to do in your personal relationship. But again, this is your business and it's important. And I think you do owe it to clients to exhaust the options, right? You absolutely owe it to them to throw everything that you have at them, look for new solutions. But I do think it's possible that you can reach a point with a client where you may not be the person who's best suited to help them.
Sure.
And, I think in like psychology and in therapy too, it's always talked about like some people are at a point where they aren't ready to be helped. That's just, that's a state of mind. And you can be the best coach in the world. And if they're not ready to hear what you're saying and take it in, then your words are useless, right? They're just falling on deaf ears. And so I think when you've kind of exhausted the things you do, you've talked to other people, you've talked to them, because obviously talking with them is very important, trying to get to the bottom of it. Then it may be time to have a conversation with the client and just say, are you happy with our coaching relationship? Do you want to continue? Do you feel like you'd be better with somebody else? So not necessarily giving up with the client, but exactly. Like mutual discussion about it. You don't just ghost on them or fire them through text message. I think that's unprofessional and really shitty.
Yeah, totally.
But I do think you may reach a point where it's better for both of you if you go your separate ways. And the only way you can know that is to check in with the client. And so for instance, one of the things I do is every month with my clients, I actually have them fill out like a little online check-in where I ask them just like how things are going, if they want me to change the programming. And I ask them if there's any way that I'm not meeting their needs, essentially. Like if there's something they expect from me that I'm not giving them. And the reason I do it through this little online form is because they may not feel comfortable saying it to my face. And this way they have an outlet. If there's something they want to change but they didn't feel like they could say it to me, they can type it in. So I think as long as you try and foster that relationship with the client and keep things open, then it's okay sometimes to let a client go, but just do it in a good way and make sure that you're talking with the client about it. Because at the end of the day, if they're not ready, they're not ready. Think of how many times clients have tried before they come to us, right? We may be the coach that breaks through, but sometimes clients will hire coaches over years and years before they finally either find one who speaks the language they need or before they personally get to a point where they're ready to make the change in their life. Because people aren't always. It requires them prioritizing this. And if they don't want to, they don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on. I feel that. I feel that. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about Shohreh.
Woo.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested just in general. Like, we briefly talked about how you were in law for a while, and you shifted gears to personal training and coaching. But just knowing about you more like personally, like you're kind of if I were to look at you from a perspective of the general public, and to me, I think the way you live your life is fucking cool, but general public is like, okay, she is vegan, she's super lean, she's all got this muscle mass, she lifts weights. How is this even possible? Like, what's going on? So, how did you come to like this point of like lifting weights and doing these things and like? Because I'm sure you've had your own like kind of journey throughout this process. Like, what brought you to this point in terms of that?
So I used to be like a cardio queen, like many women. I spent a lot of time on the treadmill, in college in particular. Yeah. So I struggled with my weight. I was never, I wouldn't ever have said that I was necessarily overweight. Like, no one would have clinically told me, like, you need to lose weight for your health necessarily. But when I was in high school, I kind of went through this, typical woman growth spurt thing. And then I spent a summer where I actually worked in a mall. So I worked at Cold Stone Creamery, which is the ice cream shop. And I spent the summer eating ice cream toppings, and food court food. I ate like a lot of Panda Express and Sparrow. As you can imagine, I gained a lot of weight that summer, such that by the end of the summer, I mean, there was like a noticeable difference. And, it was typical teenage stuff. But, of course, it's, like, destroyed me inside as, like, a young woman. And, like, in high school especially, most of my friends were, size double, 0. And were teeny tiny people. And I felt huge, And it's not even that I was that big, but I felt that way around other people. And so that was, like, a huge self-esteem hit at the time. And, I don't know, it was hard. This was my last year of high school when this happened, and so it was really hard for me. And I remember begging my parents to get me a personal trainer, and my parents were like, no, we're not getting you a personal trainer. And I was so upset with them. I was like, why can't you just pay for this for me? Like, I really want this, I really need this. And my dad's like, well, why don't you just work out? Like, why do you need someone else to help you? And I was like, in my mind, the personal trainer was the magic solution, right? Yeah. Like, my workouts were ineffective, but like, if they did it, it would help me. So I did not get a personal trainer at the time. I think I got like a free assessment at the Lifetime Fitness, but I didn't actually get a trainer. And so I blame my parents. I remember asking my dad, like, can I take a fat loss pill? Because even at that young age, I mean, I was 16, 17, that had already permeated into my brain of like, these things exist, and I have friends who are taking them, and that will help me be thin. So all that stuff is kind of settling into my brain at a very young age. Yeah. And so, I went to college, and like during college, my weight kind of fluctuated between, all right, I lost some weight, and then kind of would gain it back and forth. Pretty typical, I think, for college when, again, my diet consisted of a lot of pizza and pizza-related things like calzones. And at one point, I went through a health kick where I was like, all right, I'm going to start eating from the salad bar. And, of course, I'd do, like, the Caesar salad with, the croutons and the Caesar dressing and, like, all the Parmesan cheese. So, not really the healthiest eating. So, meanwhile, my older brother, is actually going to school for strength and conditioning. Cool. So he actually now is a strength and conditioning coach. So he got his undergrad and then his master's in this. And he all the while is like telling me, this cardio is not going to get you anywhere. Yeah. You need to start lifting weights. And of course, I am like the typical resistant woman. Like, I don't want to lift weights. Like, I'm going to get bulky. Why can't I just do cardio? And he's like, no, the magazines are lying to you. You need to start lifting weights. And eventually, over time, he wore me down. And I was like, all right, fine. I actually took a weightlifting class in college because I could get like a PE credit for this. Yeah. So that was kind of my first foray into the weight room, which was nice because I had previously only seen men in there to be honest. It was in a totally different part of, I went to UW-Madison for college, and we had this building called the Surf, which is now being torn down, which is really sad. If there are any Badgers out there, hello. But so, there were, the weight room was like in the basement, and the cardio stuff was up on the 3rd floor. So, you know, they kept it like even super separate from each other, and there had only ever been, you know, the guys down there. So the weightlifting class was really great because there were other women in it. There were a couple other women in it, and it was a nice intro to that room, to equipment I had never used before and wouldn't have otherwise known how to do. And so once that barrier had kind of been broken down, I got into it a little bit more, and I started doing, you know, some of like the body pump classes, which are maybe not the most effective thing, but again, it's a great way to get into this idea of like, what is a squat? What is a hip hinge, and learn some of the basic movements. And then over time, my brother started to actually write programs for me, which was really cool of him. And he did this for free for many years, which was good practice for him while he was doing his strength and conditioning stuff, because he was writing them for athletes as well. And that's kind of how I started to get into it. With the nutrition piece, that came much later for me. Probably after, I mean, up through college, like Easy Mac was still pretty much my diet. There was a lot of like cheap food that I could eat. I think I finally learned to make an omelet my senior year, and that was a crowning achievement for me. So after college, I moved to Chicago, and I discovered this whole clean eating craze, which had just gotten into kind of the hype at the time. And so the idea with clean eating was and is that certain foods are clean, and I guess the other foods are dirty, which is, I don't recommend this anymore. But what it taught me was how to read food labels, which was huge, because I had literally, up to that point, never read a label and didn't know, I had no idea what was in my food. I had no idea what was good and what was bad. I didn't know there were different names for sugar in food. Like, and I remember I did this pantry cleanup, and I noticed that almost every processed food in my house had high fructose corn syrup. I was like, oh my God, everything has high fructose corn syrup. So, you know, my first step was like, throw that stuff out and get versions of things without high fructose corn syrup. And with clients too, like, you'd be surprised, like, these little things can make such a huge difference. Because that was like a big deal for me, like, to go through my pantry and like pick out slightly better choices. And so I was really into that for many years, getting more and more into this clean eating. And again, the idea with clean eating is eating foods with less ingredients, essentially. So eating less processed foods, and if you're eating processed foods, the ingredients labels should be, you know, 5 to 10 ingredients, and they should be pronounceable ingredients. So there shouldn't be a bunch of chemicals and stuff in it. And those principles by themselves are sound. The problem with this idea of clean eating is that people can take it to the extreme of it becoming a restrictive diet and being like, okay, well, these foods are clean and the other foods are dirty, which are total misnomers, because foods aren't clean, foods aren't dirty, foods aren't good, foods aren't bad. It's, you know, we put all these feelings onto food, when in reality the food is just food, and some of it's more healthful and some of it's less healthful. So that was kind of the first foray into like, let's get a little bit healthier. And then maybe, it was probably 2 years ago now, a good friend of mine asked me to watch a documentary called Cowspiracy, if you've ever heard of that or watched that documentary on Netflix. And not that it was a good documentary, but not like it's like the most amazing documentary in the world. But the thing that really struck me with that documentary was that I had never even heard that factory farming had any relation to greenhouse gases and emissions. And I was like, man, if I don't know this, like, what else do I not know about like industrial farming, about animal products? And I'm one of those people where once you kind of like open that door a little bit, I'm like, I want to read all the things, like watch all the documentaries. So I actually spent a year kind of gaining a lot of different information about kind of factory farming in the United States and animal cruelty, how different effects that meats and animal products can have on the body. And, you know, the science kind of goes both ways depending on what study that you read. And at the end of the day, during all of this, I started cooking vegan. And so I went through different phases where I'd be like, okay, well, I'm vegan at home and I'm vegetarian outside the house, or like I'll eat whatever I want if I'm not if I'm outside the house, but at home I'll be vegetarian. So it was kind of this like wave of different eating styles, which was good. I think if I had just tried to go vegan overnight, I never would have stuck with it. I needed this kind of year period to explore and play with it. And also because my husband I think would have freaked out too if I said, we're vegan overnight. And, you know, he was really freaked out when I remember I texted him. I was like, I think I might need to go vegan. He was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So it was good for him to kind of have this transition period for me too. But at the end of it, I essentially decided I actually really liked eating vegan. It made me feel really good because I follow more of a whole foods, plant-based sort of veganism. Obviously, you can be a junk food vegan. There are vegan brownies, vegan pizza, all that stuff. And I love that stuff, don't get me wrong. And I do eat that stuff some of the time, but the vast majority of the time, I'm focusing on eating, you know, a lot of different vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds. And so my diet is really kind of filled with all this good, wholesome stuff. I eat way more vegetables than I used to because it's the bulk of my meals. And I used to be like a huge steak and cheese person. Like anybody who knew me in both phases of my life was like shocked when I went vegan because my favorite foods, if someone had asked what my favorite foods were, I was like steak and cheese. Like filet mignon was my jam.
Dang.
And so I really thought I would miss it so much more. And I don't. And I think that's why it was so easy for me is because I had this kind of year-long transition period. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, I don't have cravings for meat. I don't really have cravings for cheese. There's actually some awesome vegan cheese, you know, supplement replacement type things. And so I just felt really good on it. And as I said earlier, I'm diet agnostic when it comes to my clients. I do not push veganism on them. I have clients who come to me who are vegan or who are trying to transition, and I'm in a unique place to help them with that. But I do not make my clients be plant-based, and I think that would be highly inappropriate and not a professional thing for me to do. There are some trainers out there who are like, I'm vegan, I will only work with vegans. Yeah. And I've actually reached out to a trainer before to work with them, and they said they wouldn't work with me because I was vegan. Because they were like, I don't know how to help you. I don't think you can get enough protein on that diet, which is just a fundamental misunderstanding of veganism. Yeah. Like, you know, that's kind of the big thing. People are like, oh, how do you get your protein? I'm like, from all the plants that have protein, because there's a lot of them. Yeah. So, you know, that's not an issue for me. But people are kind of set in their ways with some of that stuff. So I try to not take that approach and just help people with where they're at, because I know that my life and what I need is different from what other people need. And there are some vegans who would, you know, if you're listening and you're vegan and you're not that person, you're probably like screaming right now because a lot of vegans are very much intent on like turn everyone vegan because they see it as, you know, the morality issue, which is a piece of it for me personally, but it's not my job to, you know, to proselytize about this and make other people change to that. So that's kind of how I came to be where I am. You know, I got really into strength training. I eventually turned vegan. And as a result, you know, it took many years for me to get like this lean and gain a lot of muscle. It's definitely a process of just over time getting better and better habits. And so I'm kind of that perfect example of like, no, I did not get shredded in like 3 to 6 months. That is not what happened. It took a very long time. This process probably started for me back in, I don't know, I probably started lifting weights in 2008, 2009. And then the clean eating thing, I think maybe started in like 2011. So it's like been, you know, a decent amount of time to kind of make these changes and have my body change. And I remember telling my brother when I first got into weightlifting, I was like, how long will it take until I get to a point where like my biceps like show when I'm not even flexing? Like this was like the epitome for me. He's like, that takes years. And I was like, what? Like, you know, I just thought I could just like do enough bicep curls and that would be a thing. Maybe if I worked out 4 hours a day, it could have been. But it did take years. It took a long time for people to like look at my arms and be like, wow, you have really toned arms. So it's a process. And so I wish more people would know that going in, that like it does take time. You're not just there's too many people who are like 6 weeks to shredded is their advertising for their program. I'm like, no, it's not real.
Years. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I like whenever people come on the show, even it's just for them to tell their stories so people can understand. Because I know people are going to go to your page and like, man, she's ripped. And then they're like, I can do it. And then once they get in their head that they can do it, which is great. I mean, it's awesome to have that muse, that motivation come through you. But then I almost think like motivation, I don't want to say it's garbage, but in some ways it's BS. It's bullshit.
Fleeting. Is what it is.
It's fleeting. And it's like I think the more people can hear these things, like you speaking about like your journey from where you were to where you are now, how it was a process, how you did change, and even people that are vegan can get strong and gain muscle and do these things. because people don't even think that, they don't even count vegetable as part of their macros. It's not part of the macros.
Yeah.
It's like vegetable is just like this weird entity that goes through your body and it comes out with poop. It's like a separate. It's like how does that happen? You know?
Yay, fiber.
Yeah, that's it. It's like it's a fibrous thing. But I mean, if people actually go look on like and actually research what some of these foods have, I think broccoli has a shit ton of protein. Broccoli has like
spinach, tons of it. Beans, lentils are huge.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of that. Like tofu, tempeh, all that good stuff.
And the whole like, okay, so the tofu and tempeh, I'm curious to see what you have to say. Like you hear about like the soy being like very estrogenic. You see that like very commonly talked about. What are your viewpoints on that?
Yeah, so I've actually done a lot of research on this because that's a common question that I get from people, of course. They're like, oh, I don't eat soy, or how do you eat so much soy? Yeah. And obviously, anecdotally, I'm fine. And, you know, my husband's fine. He doesn't have man boobs, and we eat a lot of soy. Seriously, guys are always like, oh, soy's going to give me man boobs. I'm like, no. So first of all, let me point out that, like, what soy has in it is called phytoestrogen. So it's not estrogen in the sense that it is in like the female body. So that's kind of key. Like they work a little bit differently scientifically. And while I've studied this, I don't know the terms enough to get into the science. But you can look this up. I highly recommend, if you want to find out more about this, search Precision Nutrition Soy. They have some amazing articles that break down the research about this. And to kind of just give you a summary of what those say, basically they say that highly processed soy is not recommended. So we're talking about, you know, like the soy syrups and stuff like that they put in foods as fillers and in processed foods. That's not something you want to eat. But good quality soy, so, you know, soy milk, edamame, tofu, tempeh, things that are kind of more of that whole soy, those are fine. They basically say we recommend limiting it to 3 servings a day. But most of the studies that have been done on this were at extremely high amounts of soy, like way more than a person is going to eat in a day. And the studies are all, you know, they show different things. Some of them show like, okay, there could be an issue with this, and the others of them don't really show that at all. So it's inconsistent. And in general, nutrition science, that's true. It's a young science. So precision nutrition, they talk a lot about that, about how, you know, compared to other sciences, which go back ages and ages, nutrition is really something we've started studying only recently. So our knowledge is more limited on what we know, and studies show different things based on different people. Also, women are frequently not studied for exercise and nutrition because of our cycle. There's this idea that, like, okay, well, we can't, figure out how your hormones are affecting things, and we can't make sure everyone's in the same place in their cycle. So that's why men are more commonly studied in these things than women. So you see all these studies that have men in them, and it's like, all right, well, so we know how maybe this affects men. It could affect women totally differently, and we don't know because they haven't been studied for it. But overall, my thoughts about soy, going back to the question, are that, again, stick with the good sources of soy. I eat a ton of tempeh and tofu, and I love it. I also love just edamame. It has tons of protein in it. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's great. I think that if you eat, maybe 3 to 4 servings of this a day, nothing is going to happen to you. There have been no studies that show that at that low level with high-quality soy that, again, you're going to get man boobs or have other estrogen-related issues. So I think they're fine. Clients will come to me and say, oh yeah, I avoid it altogether. And I mean, you can avoid it, but especially if you're vegan, it's hard to also be vegan and avoid soy, because then you're taking out almost like a whole food group of options, especially at restaurants, which are commonly using soy and tempeh in their dishes because they're kind of the most meat-like options that are available. And they're just a really great kind of like main thing. Like I'll make like a tofu steak where previously there would have been, a meat steak. So it's a good kind of replacement. And that's why I like it so much. It also just tastes really good.
Yeah, for sure. I think also there's this thing, just vegetable, if you even shift gears to vegetables, period, like there's this whole thing, and I've had many discussions with people about vegetables, but there's this whole thing, especially in America, where it's like they weren't taught or weren't even introduced to the idea of vegetables or making them palatable in the first place. Because it was almost like even conditioned into them that there were the nasty things you feed to the dog or you throw on the ground. You know, like they just had like a freaking raw broccoli, raw carrot.
Yeah.
And then ranch was the thing that helped you like make it taste good. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a precision nutrition article that came out recently. It was really cool. It was like you pick vegetable
I love that one.
Complement all that stuff. It was cool. So like you don't get so like attached to one vegetable. You kind of learn how to complement those vegetables with certain spices and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And they give you options. And I think almost. Now I wonder, because like it's out there, like the information's out there. You can create so many cool recipes from all these different websites. But also when you go to a restaurant and they make you a cool dish, like a Thai vegetable dish, it's like, oh, that's so delicious. What is in this? I could, you know it tastes good, but you go home and if you're being asked to eat vegetables, you're like, there's no freaking way, it's so disgusting. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of like this weird like cognitive dissonance between like you actually experiencing that it tasted really damn good. And you being like, well, no, conditioning has taught me that it's not, and it's so much fucking work. So, like, what do you do there?
Oh, yes, people hate vegetables. And this is funny to me now because literally all of my meals are, vegetables and fruits. Like, I eat plants for my diet.
Yeah.
So it's funny to me. But I think, and I'm not even saying this as a vegan, I'm just saying this as, like, an American person. I think our culture is extremely meat-centric, right? Yeah. And so most of the time people's plate is, like, mostly meat, and then your vegetable might be some potatoes, which is like, okay, great. And then maybe you have like a roll with butter or whatever on the table, and that's often the meal. Or if you have some kind of vegetable, it has been doctored such that you wouldn't necessarily know it was the vegetable anymore, right? Like we have potato salad, which is mostly mayonnaise, or we have something was like cooked in so much butter and salt that it's like not recognizable. I mean, this is common in the South. If you like see how these like southern vegetables, or we've deep fried them. You know,
everything's fucking deep fried.
Exactly. So people are used to eating these like hyper palatable vegetable things, and that's the only vegetables they get, and so it's hard because. One of the things that I'm sure you've seen, like the precision nutrition plate, like their recommended plate. And in their recommended plate, they actually suggest that like half the plate should be vegetables, right? And that if you're going to have meat, it should be like a fist's worth of meat or protein, whatever your protein choice is. And it's funny because I remember I was doing some research for a blog recently, and I was looking up like what are the most common vegetables that Americans eat, and it's potatoes and tomatoes, and they're most commonly in the form of French fries and ketchup, which is like the most heart-sinking statistic I've ever read when it comes to food, because people just aren't eating it. And so I think one of the things you have to do is break down the barriers of like how do we eat the vegetables. So I think Precision Nutrition did a great job with kind of this guide to what can we pair with vegetables. With a lot of my clients, I'm like, give yourself permission to buy the already chopped veggies at the grocery store. Whatever you have to do for convenience to get vegetables in your diet, like I don't fucking care. Like, I don't need you to sit and chop. They're like, oh, do I have to like sit and chop for 3 hours as part of meal prep? And I'm like, no, like there's ways to do meal prep that are fast. So if you can afford it, and a lot of times there is no difference. Like you go look at the mushrooms in the grocery store, and I noticed that like the cut ones are the exact same price as the non-cut ones. You're maybe just getting a little bit less. Yeah. So if that fits into your budget, just buy the damn veggies that are already chopped, so that like that's one less thing you have to do with them. Yeah. Same thing with one of my favorite things to do is make a big salad for the week, or as Jill Coleman calls it, a big ass salad or a BAS. And I find that's really helpful if I just have this big salad made in my fridge, and like I usually make up a dressing and I put it in a little dressing container. And then with, maybe dinner, I can make sure I get vegetables no matter what I made. Get a big helping of salad. And I usually make that from scratch because I like to meal prep, I like to cook. But they have tons of pre-made salads out there. You can buy like the veggie bag already. Oh, that's true. And, you can buy a dressing, just read the label and make sure there's not a bunch of shit in it. And like, there you go. Ta-da, you have vegetables. Or go to Whole Foods. If you're like a Whole Foods person, they have all this pre-made like vegetable stuff. You can make a giant vegetable salad there too. So there are ways around this idea that vegetables are terrible, and also spices are huge. I actually literally posted on Instagram about this today. So I'll go to people's houses and they have like either just salt and pepper or maybe like garlic powder. I'm like, so how are you cooking your food with just those 3 spices? I probably have 60 spices in my house. Like it's a lot of spices and like curry paste and all this stuff. And those things do not add many calories to your food at all. They're usually really cheap. I mean, you don't have to buy organic spices.
Yeah.
And they add a ton of flavor to your food. I mean, I can just roast. I don't even use oil that often anymore when I'm roasting veggies because, you know, oils are pretty high calorie and I just like to get my calories from other places.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll maybe use like vegetable broth and then I just put a shit ton of spices and I roast it in the oven. Like roasted vegetables are amazing.
Yeah.
I think people growing up had, you know, the boiled gross vegetables a lot. And so they have this idea that it can only taste a certain way. You know, it's like when someone goes to a restaurant and they're try the Brussels sprouts for the first time, and it's like the pan-fried like oil, Brussels sprouts, and they're like, "Oh my god, Brussels sprouts are amazing!" And I'm like, "You can do that with any food." You know, roasting things is
always a fucking
magical.
Brussels only Brussels sprouts.
There's just fine. If you only want to eat Brussels sprouts, it's good.
Yeah.
But and then also again, this idea of like we don't have variety, so people eat like so. One of the nutrition skills I actually work on with my clients is not only quantity, so eating more vegetables. So I actually do like a challenge where I try to get my clients to eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables each day.
That's awesome.
Which is hard for a lot of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because and also I have clients who are terrified of fruit because of sugar, which is again a whole other conversation. Don't be afraid of fruit, y'all. No. Seriously. But I'll have them do this, and then my clients who that's easy, my next challenge is like, okay, try to make them all different colors. Because it's so important to really eat the rainbow when it comes to vegetables. And people are kind of have their favorites. And so getting them outside their comfort zone and being like, nope, you can try different things because those colors are, nutrients in this food. The more brightly colored a vegetable or fruit is, the more nutrients that are inside of that vegetable or fruit. So you really do want to have this wide variety because they all have different things to offer your body. And people, again, if you're only eating tomatoes and potatoes, and really potatoes are a starch more than they're a vegetable, like you would use potatoes in place of a grain, you know? Yeah. People will be like, for my meal, I'm going to have like this for my protein, and then I'm going to have a sweet potato as my vegetable, and then rice for my grain. I'm like, actually the sweet potato can be your grain because it's starchy. You want like a green vegetable or like some other colored vegetable in there. So I think there's just kind of a lot of misconceptions out there and misunderstandings about vegetables, and people are afraid of them. They're just like, they taste gross. Yeah. We should just have like a giant feast with our clients where we just cook them up a bunch of vegetables and don't give them anything else. Yeah. And they're gonna be like, it's so good. Yeah. We'll be like, this is only vegetables. There's nothing else here. You too can do this.
I mean, it's like I think what's also silly is that they only, like you were saying, like fucking just butter and salt and pepper is all they do. And to most, I was boggled because I moved from Dubai, and I know you have Iranian roots.
Iranian.
So you have Iranian roots, and I have like Middle Eastern Indian roots, and like I grew up with like spices. I grew up with like all that. So it doesn't compute as much to me as like the typical American here. So I went to one of my friends' places when I first made a friend here in the U.S. First friend. I was like, good old, what's up, Ryan? Listen to this, Ryan. What's up? Good old Ryan. And it was just like, man, you gotta try this dish my mom made. And it was like this like asparagus and green beans, just drenched in butter and pepper and salt. And I took one bite, and I was like.
I couldn't even eat it.
I couldn't even eat it, and it's like, what's wrong, man? It's like the bomb. I'm like,
oh my god,
this is like the bomb, man. Like, I'll tell you, what's the bomb. So it's funny to me, like, coming from my perspective, how easy it was for me to just transition into like, because I grew up around vegetables. Like, sometimes it wasn't healthy because my mom would like give us like a ton of rice and a ton of, but just transitioning back into maybe a healthier way of eating was easy. I was like, I know it's palatable. I almost like crave veggies because of the crunch and the taste and how it all kind of matches. So like, I also wonder now, like with most people in America, like how have they changed like that, even like the way their tongue interacts with the food and how that wires back to the brain and how that changes the neurochemistry of like it's just fascinating to me how that has changed. Because then you see these people who you may encourage to eat vegetables, and they'll find every confirmation bias to pull them to the side of, well, I can still burn fat and build muscle without it. Yeah. And they'll really argue hard for it. And no matter what the science says, if science says like, it decreases inflammation and helps you recover from workouts better, it's better for your joints, whatever. It doesn't fucking matter because to them, it's not directly linked to getting stronger, building muscle, or burning fat, even though it is. In reality, it just is. And I think that's tough because I've even had this situation come up where I have a biochemist, a PhD in biochemistry and nutrition, talking about this stuff, pulling from PubMed articles, talking about like her conclusions from all of it, talking about the science behind like what's in each vegetable, like and how it's physiologically interacting in the body. Someone might hear that and still be like, okay, well, still, I'm going to be like, I can still build muscle and burn fat without it.
It's all about the gains, bro.
And so that is a point of contention, frustration for me sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't even, like, there's a precision nutrition way, which is like introduce like one thing at a time. But then when people are just only fucking doing Brussels sprouts, it drives me nuts. Like, what do you do about that?
Yeah, well, and I think part of it too is like how you approach it. So, for instance, with me, with especially kind of this precision nutrition model, which we both use to some extent in our coaching. You know, kind of changing the challenge around per client. So. Precision nutrition is great because it gives you these ideas of like what are things you can work on, and then I think to some extent you still need to tailor that to the client because one size does not fit all. So if you have this client who like literally they're only going to eat Brussels sprouts, maybe their assignment is go pick out a vegetable you've never eaten before. And you give them that extra challenge and you say go pick it out, look online, different ways you can cook it. And you cook it, or you ask me for help, and I'll give you a way that you can cook this vegetable. And so just kind of getting them outside their comfort zone, because you're exactly right where you're kind of talking about this, like the palate piece, where it really does change. And I noticed that especially first transitioning to like the clean eating and then transitioning to the veganism is that your taste buds literally change. This is scientifically proven. And so things that would have been normal to me before maybe now taste overly sweet to me or overly salty. Or like when you tasted that butter-drenched thing where most people are like, this is delicious. And you're like, well, this is disgusting. It's because your tongue is different than other people's tongues. And our tongues have the ability to change. And so when someone starts to eat more healthfully, they eat more vegetables, they eat more things, at first it's going to feel uncomfortable and like maybe not that good to them. But then as their tongue adjusts and gets away from these kind of hyperpalatable foods like the McDonald's and the sugar powdery donuts and whatever, those things start to taste better and you start to crave them a little bit more. So it's hard because it takes time, and some of your clients don't want to give you the time.
No, definitely not.
They're just like, no, I'm not doing this. And I think you know it's interesting because obviously most of my clients, because I am working with women, they're less about like hashtag gains than some of your clients probably are. They're more about like hashtag weight loss. And so for them, I mean, really, if I really wanted to go base level with the selling piece, vegetables are extremely low calorie. You know what I mean?
That's an easy piece.
So if I really have to do something to get them to eat it, and I'm like, look, you want to lose weight, that means you need to get your calories down. With vegetables, you can eat a ton of them and not reach anywhere close to that calorie level that you're at if you're eating this other thing. So there's a reason to put it in your diet. So if I have to go there, I can go there, but I don't want to go there. You know, I want my clients to love vegetables because I love vegetables, and like, I know how much they will enrich their lives. I mean, just because. Again, being vegan, I did so much research on this before going vegan about like how important it is to eat plants and like this effect they have on your cognitive ability and on your body and how they lower your risk for diabetes and heart disease and all these terrible things, different cancers. I mean, nobody wants to be at risk for this stuff. And it's like such an easy and inexpensive way to get away from a lot of this disease and these other things. And people, they don't. They just struggle to do it. And so I think that is like sort of the battle right now with people is like now the science is out there. We know this stuff is healthy. We know that, you know, there's different opinions on sort of eating meat and health, but there is pretty much most people agree now that like you can't only eat meat and be healthy. You can't only eat animal products and be healthy. You need to expand and have other things in your diet. And so kind of learning new ways to get clients to do that, I think, is tricky. I think we all you're going to have to work together and be like, what works? What is working with clients? Because I think that really is the hardest thing for people when they come to you and they've never eaten vegetables. They don't quite know how to eat vegetables. And so, like I said, I am just constantly brainstorming ways of like how can I remove the barriers? Or instead of taking things away, maybe adding them, right? So like, what's your normal meal? How can I help you add something in there? Like, oh, you want to make some fried rice with chicken? Cool. Why don't you buy like this frozen pack of stir-fry vegetables? You don't have to do anything. You just dump it in there with your regular soy sauce and everything else, and then ta-da, you have vegetables. So I think just making it a little bit easier for people who like maybe just walking into the produce section is terrifying for them. And being like, all right, what are some easier ways we can get vegetables into our lives? Or even when you go out to eat, being like, just order a side salad. Just order a side salad, pick a dressing, eat it. Getting them used to having it in their lives is maybe the quickest way to get them to change. Because I've never had someone who started eating vegetables then be like, well, never again. This isn't for me. Most people actually do develop a taste and enjoyment for them. And like you said, a craving for them. Eventually you get to a point where if you have been eating vegetables and you stop, your body's like, excuse me, like I would like some more of those because they were delicious and they make me feel good. So it's just getting clients over that hump. And getting them there, which I know it's a struggle. I struggle with it too.
It's also, I guess, like, what concerns me, and I come from the interesting place, but like what concerns me is that it's like we understand as coaches that it's important to eat vegetables. We understand that it's beneficial for your health. It decreases all risk mortality. We get it, and it's not only just like this high horse thing of, oh yeah, we're right when you're wrong, and it's not even like the old adage of your mom said eat your vegetables, so you got to eat vegetables. At this point, for me, it's like it's just the fucking truth, and I think that's what kind of aches at me and pulls at my heartstrings sometimes, because it's like the information is so prevalent, talking about cancer, talking about heart disease, talking about all these things, and it breaks my heart to see someone get to the throes of those diseases. Like, just go into that. And then they're like, oh, fuck, well, now, fuck it, I'm done. Like, I lived my life. And, it just, and this gets into deeper emotional spaces, right? Like, how they see themselves, what is their self-worth, it goes deeper and deeper. And I've even gotten to a point in my, coaching in my career where it's all I can do is just slowly kind of guide them one step at a time towards trying something new each time. But sometimes it's like, in a weird way, it's like, maybe I just let them go into that for a bit. Let them go in that direction for a bit. Maybe they need to feel a contrast. I hopefully, I would never wish any disease on anyone.
Right, of course.
But just, maybe they go towards that direction for a bit, feel crappy for a bit, and then when I was doing that other thing for a while, for the first couple of weeks, my workouts were better, and I felt more motivated to go to the gym. Oh, there's some connection there. And then maybe through contrast, they can see for themselves and gain their own insights. That's a scary place. And then I think about education. It's like, why didn't I learn this in high school? What did I learn in high school in terms of nutrition? And I started to look back. I was like, I don't think I learned anything about nutrition in high school. I hit up freaking kolaches. I hit up donuts. I had Twinkies. We had Twinkie parties. We just
fucking Twinkie
Twinkie parties.
What do you do at a Twinkie party?
Just we would go. We had these weird competitions. It's fucking weird, but weird competitions where we would try to eat as many Twinkies as possible, and then drink a gallon of milk. We're stupid boys.
Oh my god!
And then we'd go run and do feats of strength.
What?
You remember I think it was Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Where they have this Festivus.
Yeah,
Festivus. So we had feats of strength. We had air your grievances.
This is such a teenage boy thing.
Oh, for sure. We were so dumb. Then we got the girls into it. Of course. And then of course they joined.
You want to be one of the boys? Let's get in on this.
It was just a puking disaster. Everyone was throwing up.
Yeah, of course.
It was we were so bright-eyed and ready to go at the beginning, and then all fucking on the ground, dead. So. Yeah, it's just a weird place for me to see how to even guide someone there. But I think at the end of the day too, I think people sometimes look at me and they think, oh, he's always got his shit together. I'm like, fuck no, I don't.
Right. Yes.
And they also say things like, oh, you must always eat healthy. I'm like, no, not really. That's not the case. And I think people think that I come from a place of this hard nose, like you have to eat this way. But I'm all for like people eating like foods that are like maybe hyper palatable sometimes. Like that's fine. Like if you want your palate to like really experience these different things, go for it. You know, I'm all up for it. But I think there needs to be this like there's this the emotional side of eating. And we probably do a second podcast on this.
Yeah.
The emotional side of eating.
Oh, we could.
And then there's this just the pure truth of the body, and that you can't ignore it. And do you think there needs to be this? It needs to start with parenting, or is it like a parenting and education? Like, because like now what we're doing is we're having to bring back adults to a baseline level of understanding and health, and then hopefully launch them into like levels that they want to get to.
Yeah.
So like what, all we can do is keep educating, but what needs to happen at an early age?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question. So one thing I'll say in regards to what we as coaches can do is I think transparency is really important. And so like you said, you'll have people who come to you and they assume that you're perfect and that, you know, you always get your workouts in and you always eat amazingly and you're just living this like Adonis lifestyle.
Yeah, right.
And you're not, because no one is. You're freaking human. No one can sustain that long term. And so one thing that I've tried to do, because a lot of my brand is in social media, there's a lot of people kind of following me on Instagram and stuff like that, is I try to be extremely transparent on there. I literally have hashtag Transparent Tuesday, which is where I like go really deep into like transparency. Because I think there is so much kind of bullshit and lies on social media, and there's all this like perfection, and it's giving people anxiety. And so I want people to know how I eat and how my workouts go and how I don't always feel motivated, because I think it's important for them to know, like, yes, your coach falls prey to these different things too. And that also that I understand that you can't be perfect all the time. In fact, when people restrict too much, they then, reaction that comes from that is a binge. Like if we're looking at food specifically, psychologically, if you restrict yourself too much, your body tries to get back to homeostasis. It tries to get back to that equilibrium, and you will binge to get there. And so people are like, oh, why am I binging? I'm like, your body is the reason that you're binging. It's because you tried to keep the things that it wanted from it, and now it's going back the other way. And that's a whole other thing. We could do like literally an entire podcast on intuitive eating. Part two coming in the future. But I think it's important for us as coaches to make sure that our clients know that we are not only are we not perfect, but we don't expect perfection from them, but we do want them to like put in some effort and to try things. I always try to tell my clients that everything we do, they can look at as collecting data about themselves. So to try as much as they can to take the emotional piece out of it and to look at things more objectively and figure out like what can we learn from this. So, maybe we try a nutrition skill for 2 weeks or something. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we look back at it and I say, well, what did you like about that? What did you not like about that? Do you want to fully implement that in your life? Do you want to partially implement that in your life? And we just kind of gather. Like when I have clients sometimes have them do something I call a food and mood diary. So not only are they writing down what they're eating, but they're also writing down how it physically made them feel, how emotionally it made them feel. Like, did they feel guilty if they ate a certain thing? Did something make them feel good or give them a lot of energy? And that's all data. We use that to figure out like, okay, like where are your pain points? Like what are you struggling with? What are you doing really well that, we need to point out like, hey, you're already doing this awesome, but let's work on these things. So I think that's kind of important, is to make sure that clients look at their lives a little bit more objectively, a little bit more scientifically, and just remember everything is gathering data, whether we're in the gym, no matter how we're eating, because at the end of the day, like they're writing the book of their life, right? Sure. And so, but they need information to make decisions. You can't just like make the decision blindly. So they have to figure out what works for them. And our job is kind of to guide them and help them figure that out. That being said, I do think that a real nutrition education is really important. If not for the masses, for frickin' doctors.
Oh my
God.
That's another podcast.
I know, that's a whole other podcast. But, For those of you who don't know, doctors get very little nutrition training. Like, I'm talking like a couple hours of nutrition training. But people go to their doctors and they're expecting kind of this holistic health approach, and then their doctors maybe don't know much about nutrition, or they know the bare basics, and so they can't help them. I mean, and we could do an entire podcast on like doctors who don't treat their fat clients well, which is a thing. It's a real thing. And I've had it happen with my own clients where literally I had a good experience with a doctor as a thin person. They went to the same doctor and the doctor fat shamed them for an hour, so this stuff really is happening. And so I think we just need a better overall education about this stuff, because doctors also can fall into the trap of like, this is a fat person and they need to lose weight and nothing else matters. And, society as a whole is having this problem. And so doctors need to understand a little bit more about nutrition and how bodies can look different ways. And we as people need to get this education early on. I don't have children, but I know like if I did have children, like I think all the time about like, okay, how would I handle certain situations? Like if I had a daughter and like we were talking about like bodies and different people, or even a son, and how that conversation would look, because I didn't have those conversations with my parents. I don't think anyone was having this conversation with their parents when I was, growing up. We ignored those things, or I just picked the stuff up from the media or other stuff. And so I think it's so important for parents too to educate themselves on this and start young. Because I'm lucky, I kind of like came to vegetables and stuff like that in the way that I came to them. And like we ate vegetables growing up, but we were not eating in like a super healthy way. And my parents are just now getting to a point where they're bringing more vegetables into the home, where they're kind of getting less processed food and cooking more stuff. So, I think if parents can start educating their kids on this, if kids could get some of this education as well as part of school, hell, I mean, we're serving shitty, terrible, unhealthy lunches in schools too. So
pizzas.
Yeah, like what good does the nutrition education do when like I literally was served Pizza Hut pizza in my school? Like if you want to learn about that, you can watch Fed Up, which talks all about, how these big corporations have found their way into the schools because they sell the food to them really, really cheap to get that brand name in there early on. So all these like terrible brain workings happening from a really young age. But, when I was in high school, I was eating, if I ate in the cafeteria, I would eat like French fries and chicken fried steak, because this is Texas, y'all. This terrible, terrible stuff that was not healthy. Like, I don't think there were ever vegetables served, except it was fried okra. Again, Texas, there'd sometimes be fried okra. So I think all around, like, the education isn't there. And so from a young age, we don't understand food. We're only given limited amounts of food. I think with parenting too, a lot of people weren't really taught what to do when their kids wouldn't eat certain things. So like some parents, their method is like, oh, they want to eat vegetables? Well, fine, I'll just feed them something else. I'll just feed them chicken nuggets. I'll just feed them the mac and cheese. And then this teaches the child, well, if I just say I don't like this thing, I never have to eat it. I have two brothers who are extremely picky, and they would refuse to eat vegetables. Like one of my brothers, if he even sees a mushroom or an onion in something, he won't eat it. So my mom would either like blend it or like chop it really tiny, or she'd leave it out, whatever she had to do to get it in there. And I think maybe I've read at least about other methods about how to deal with picky eaters when they're younger to try and get them to a point where they are more likely to eat certain things. But you as a parent have to be eating those things too. So like if you're not introducing vegetables because you're not eating them, how can you expect your children to eat them?
That's funny, because my parents, I wouldn't recommend this style of parenting. But it worked for me, I guess. Maybe I have some childhood trauma from that. But if I refuse to eat vegetables, they're like, well, you're not eating today.
Yes.
And then I didn't eat for the night. And I would throw a tantrum. Like, keep going, whatever. Just like whatever about it. And then I would go hunting for food, and they didn't have anything that was remotely like, what I wanted. And so I was like, oh, fuck it. I'll just eat. I guess I gotta survive. Right? Yeah. And that was that. But then when I moved to the U.S., that's when shit hit the fan, right? So when I moved to the U.S., all my American friends, I would go to their houses all the time, bagel bites, and
all the things.
And then the cafeteria, my mom would always make me food, and I'd be like, whatever. And I would toss the food out. I feel so bad doing this, Mom, if you're listening to this. But I would throw it out, and then her food was delicious. I don't know why I did that, but I think I was experiencing this hyper palatable foods too. And I would dip Nutter Butter bars in chocolate milk.
Oh God!
And then I would get like extra. This is nasty. Extra butter from like the cafeteria and put butter all over the Nutter Bar.
On the Nutter Bar?
With chocolate milk.
Terrible.
Eat it. And then I would do something stupid too. I would do whipped cream with Ritz crackers.
Ew, why?
Yeah. I don't know.
That doesn't even sound good. It's like you were in like this like food overlord in the United States, or overload. Yeah. And so you were just like, you're like, I'm just gonna mix and match all these things.
It was disgusting, and I felt like shit. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
If you're listening, don't put whipped cream on Ritz crackers. No.
But I mean, like I can see the appeal. Like I can definitely see the appeal, and I can see why it was like that in school. But I think it starts in school. That's supposed to be our education about everything. But this is kind of a crazy concept, but I went 4 years throughout high school without ever learning how to use my body and what to put in my body. Mm-hmm. And I just somehow magically appeared into like college, and then I have to figure shit out.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
I think that's pretty common.
But yeah, I mean, I think we could probably do like 3 or 4 podcasts on like every topic. So I'm going to leave you with one question I usually ask all my listeners, and might be kind of a deep-seated one, but I always do it. So if you were to, maybe you don't care about this at all, but if you did care about legacy, like if you gave a shit about legacy, and like there's a saying called memento mori, which is remember your mortality. Native Americans would shout it before they would go into battle, and they would always tell each other, like, if you were to leave something behind that would impact 7 generations after you die or pass, what would that be?
That is a deep question. Right? So this to me kind of harkens back to why I got into this business and kind of what I'm doing with Glitter and Grit Fitness. It's actually a good ending place. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into politics here, but I'll just say that I was disappointed with the results of the recent election, and that disappointed is a very mild word for my feelings. And I was feeling a little bit lost kind of after the election happened, and I felt like women needed more. I felt like after all of the things that I saw happening to a female candidate and then her eventual loss, that I felt like women were we were failing them in this country and around the world. And that kind of became sort of this undercurrent of my business of like, I want to do better for other women, and I want to help them do better so that they can help other women, and so we can all kind of pull each other up along the way. And so that's one of the reasons people always ask me, like, oh, why do you only work with women? Like, half the population could be your clients. You're not working with them. And there's multiple reasons. But one of the reasons is I feel a calling. Like, I'm drawn to work with women and to help girls, too, because I think a lot of this stuff starts at a young age. Yeah. So I do a lot of volunteering with the Girls Empowerment Network here in Austin, which is a super cool organization that helps to kind of empower girls at a younger age. So I just knew that overall I feel like women have gotten the short end of the stick a little bit in society. And I think, again, going back to this idea where we are so much looked at as objects and so much looked at as like the most important thing about us is the way that we look. And I feel like if I can help even a single woman come to the realization that you are so much more than that you can be anything that you want to be, regardless of what you look like, regardless of your size, and that the way you look should not hold you back from anything you want to do in the world. And that, you are a freaking badass goddess warrior, and you deserve love and respect no matter what you look like. Like, if I can leave one woman with that, that's legacy for me. And I obviously hope to leave a lot of women with that. I hope to help so many women come to that place, or at least help them on their journey to getting to that place, because there are women out there who've never even heard that. No one's ever told them that, like, they are important beyond the way that they look. And obviously I do help women change the way that they look to the extent that they want to change their bodies. But that's such a small part of what I do. And when I do consultations with clients, I literally say, like, I know that may be your most important goal, but to me, that's the icing on the cake of all the other things I can provide for you.
Yeah.
Because I want to improve your all-around confidence. I want to improve your all-around strength, both in the gym and like how you approach other situations. And I just want to make you feel like you are like a self-sufficient, amazing person who can tackle anything. And some women have never been told that. Never been told that they can be those things. You know, if you are a 300-pound person in a world that was built for 150-pound people, that's really hard. And you've been given these messages your whole life that are different than that. And so I think it can be refreshing for them to meet a coach who is like, no, this should not limit you. I don't care about your size. I want you to feel good. I want you to be healthy. I want you to enjoy movement, but all of that is outside of kind of the way you look, and I don't care about that piece. So for me, and this is becoming a more popular approach, which is awesome. I'm so glad there are other women coaches who are starting to realize, like, this is what we should be doing, and we should be focusing less on the 6 weeks to shredded and more on this and kind of empowering people. But for me, that is the thing. That's why I'm doing this, and it's so important to me. And like, obviously the exercise and the nutrition, all that stuff is great, and those are tools that I use. But the underlying message that I am trying to get across is just to help women kind of come into themselves and become the best version of themselves by letting go of some of that baggage that society has given them. So that's what I'm working on.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. I always like to ask those questions because I know they're deep-seated, but it really gets me to understand like the core of who that person is. And once I understand core beliefs, then I can really like understand how to communicate and talk and learn more about you. So thank you for sharing that. It's awesome.
You're welcome.
So if people wanted to find you, they want to work with you, they just want to connect with you, have a cool ass chat with you, what would they do?
All right, so my business is called Glitter and Grit Fitness. My website is www.glitterandgritfitness.com. Pretty easy. You can find me on Facebook, same thing. Just type in Glitter and Grit Fitness in that search bar. I'm all up in Instagram. My handle is @glitterandgritfitness. So you can type that in and find me there. If you want to shoot me an email, if you want to work with me, you can email contact@glitterandgritfitness.com. That's probably the easiest way to find me. Also, honestly, I check my Facebook messages. I check the Instagram DMs. So whoever you want to reach out to me, there are many different ways. As long as you just remember Glitter and Grit Fitness, you will find me. I'm the only one. I made sure of it. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much, dude. Till next time. Part 2 will be coming very soon.
Bye, y'all.